Well, let's welcome everyone here. Today, I think we have some people that are still popping in, but I know it's about 2 minutes after 1 o'clock. And we're happy to be joining CyberFOX on this webinar on securing the human layer. Uh, Mandy, how are you?
Doing well, Alan. How are you? Happy to be here today.
Well, it's this is the first time that we've done EasyDMARC has done a webinar with CyberFox, and I think this is the first time that you and I have done a webinar together. So I think this is going to be a good topic for us all.
I definitely agree. And I think securing the human layer is really important, especially between our two organizations, because I think we're both very people first. And at the end of the day, we're all trying to protect our people and make sure that they have the most security bounds that they can. So I think that's why this is a good topic for both of us.
Yeah, I know that, just from being in cybersecurity, I'm sure a lot of the people out in the audience as well just sort of know that you can do all that you can from a tool standpoint, but you still have that little gap where you still have the people behind the keyboards, right? And those people behind the keyboards are still like the most vulnerable point of your business for fraud and for malware attack. Um, and you can still do a lot of the stuff, and it still gets through, right?
Yeah. And that's why that people as the outermost layer and the layered approach that we're going to talk about today is the best place to start because really your end users as an MSP, your people that are at the front are your greatest vulnerability. And even when I think people sometimes will forget, like, oh, this person created this vulnerability maliciously, but most of the time, generally speaking, it's an innocent, just human mistake. So that's
Yeah.
yeah.
I guess we'll talk about too while we're talking about this, the vulnerability. I know that there's a lot of small businesses out there, with MSPs. They work with a lot of these small businesses, and I guess a lot of these small businesses think that they're really not vulnerable, that this really it's really the larger companies, correct?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, no one is immune, and typically it is the smaller to medium-sized businesses that are getting targeted more nowadays. I think that's been talked about a lot because hackers have gotten smarter too, just as cybersecurity has also gotten smarter. They know that it most likely is the smaller to medium-sized businesses and organizations that aren't going to have cybersecurity protocols in place, which is again why CyberFox and EasyDMARC coming together to talk about that works really well because we're not trying to, get large enterprise cybersecurity shoved down MSPs' faces. It's cybersecurity that they can easily handle that does protect all of those layers so that those small to medium sized organizations that are being heavily targeted are protected.
Well, why don't you kick us off? Talk to us about what is MSPs, what these guys can do.
Yeah, so I'll just go ahead to our next slide. So I don't know, I introduced myself. I'm Mandy Remke. I'm the senior product marketing manager here at CyberFox, and I'm here with Alan. If you want to do a quick intro before we really dive in.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm the global MSP growth lead for EasyDMARC. So our growth team works with MSPs, making sure that they're equipped to go out and handle the email deliverability challenges. And I've been in the cybersecurity space for about a ton of time, really almost 20 years. So that's a long time.
And I've been here in the space about 6 years. So we have, a good amount of experience between us. And I think it's nice to riff off between someone with a little bit less experience, but some. And then obviously Alan, who's been here a long while and seen a lot of the growth in our space. So that's awesome. And
That's
then
okay. You can
today,
just say I'm old. That's fine.
yeah, no, you're not. You're experienced. That's a good
Okay.
thing.
All
That's a
right.
good thing. But today, kind of like we were discussing earlier, we're just going to break down why the human element continues to play such a critical role in cybersecurity breaches, like Alan mentioned, especially for small to medium sized businesses and people that MSPs are working really hard to protect. And it's not nowadays because end users are as careless as they used to be, or maybe not even as aware, but because these attackers are getting smarter and they're intentionally targeting common human behavior that any person could make a simple mistake when you're working hard, you're working quickly, you're just trying to get things done. So these modern threats are meant to exploit those traits, and then the trust, access, over permission users, those things that these end users have that they're able to exploit and get even further into environment than maybe they should have. So for MSPs, I don't know if Alan, you want to speak to this with your experience. End user education obviously is a very essential part of this layered defense. And also when you're talking about that human layer, that's tend to be where MSPs and people's mind goes first. It's like, okay, we need that cybersecurity training, we need that education, but it's not all encapsulating, especially anymore with these modern threats.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think every company out there will have some form of security training, right? But because you've got so many layers, so many vector security vectors, you've got to start at the very base, right? And I think that if you're starting and looking at, I had one guy that I worked with one time, and his tagline was, "It's always DNS," right? It's always DNS. So, I mean, starting at DNS, like what are you doing with your mail flow? Then moving out another layer, what are you doing about the email that's coming in? Then what about the email that's going out? Then you've got layers upon that, and then at the end of it, right, you've got that human layer. We're always going to have that with us.
Yeah, definitely. And so I pulled this next slide up about understanding that human layer threat landscape. With just some quick stats, 60% of breaches in 2025 did still involve a human element. We're not, with all the AI buzz that's going around, we're not past the point of not caring about what people are doing in our environments anymore, especially for MSPs. And then 70% of organizations say that their employees still lack those fundamental cybersecurity awareness pieces. So I think that's, for me at least, that stat was really shocking as someone who even 6 years ago was already understanding the threat of not having cybersecurity training. And now, if people say they don't have it, I'm just very shocked. So that stat surprised me that that seems like a base form to start. And that's why what we're going to talk about today with the layered approach is so important, because if you don't have those proper channels of training, or even if you do, a lot of people do, they're like, oh, we're covered because we have cybersecurity training. It's really good. It's great on paper. But then you don't have those next layers for the inevitable. You don't have those next pieces that are going to help stop something when or if it comes through your environment.
Yeah, I mean, I think also there's all this part where we always think about cybersecurity from the end user standpoint, right? As far
Right.
as what we're talking about. But I think there's also a responsibility from cybersecurity from the sender's standpoint, right? The sender has to
Absolutely.
make sure that they're sending email that's verified, right? They want to protect their recipients, and a lot of this really, from the sender standpoint, has to do with brand reputation. Because if they're sending out email that is compromised and it goes to the end user, and then the end user is not up to speed, and then they get taken by it, then you've got a dual threat there on the sender and on the recipient.
Absolutely. And that's especially for MSPs where it's extremely critical to have that, because it is, as the professional that's providing those IT and cybersecurity services, it's your reputation that's on the line, especially for your senders and your end users as well. I'll go ahead
Yeah.
and go into, that's the perfect lead into email as an attack surface.
Yeah, I mean, email is always going to be with us. Email is the lifeline of all of these businesses that are out there, right? And it's very simple for MSPs, for example, to say, "Oh, I'm just going to handle DMARC by myself," right? I know how to handle DMARC, but that's DMARC is much more complicated, and we'll talk about this in a couple slides. Than somebody just going in and throwing in a DMARC record into their client's domain, right? Because At the end of the day, if you're not that familiar, and I would assume that most of the attendees on this are familiar with DMARC, but DMARC is the outbound email protocol, right? It protects your clients, it protects you, it protects all these companies with the email that you're sending out to your clients. And it tells your client's email server what to do with that email if your records don't align, right? And that is becoming the main push with all the major email service providers out there, is they want you to be aligned on SPF, DKIM, and DMARC, and have that P reject status in place, which we can talk about in a little bit.
If you want to dive into some of these stats, I know that you guys put in that were really interesting to me as well, where DMARC is something that ever since pairing up with you guys too, I've looked into even more and realized how important that spoofing the email addresses and the
Yep,
domain is so crazy, that
it
that's an
is.
ability that, like you said, it's not just the end user anymore, that people almost skip to that point. So you have to kind of take a step back and look at these.
Yeah, I mean, three or four. Now, DMARC itself, the DMARC authentication record, has been around for quite some time, right? It's been
Yeah.
around for probably 12 or 13 years, but it's just been really within the past 3 years that the major email service providers have really started to require it. And this slide that we're looking at right here, this was from our DMARC report, adoption report that we did last year, which is amazing if you look at that as an MSP. Because if you look at that, out of the top 1.8 million domains that are registered, 52% of those have no DMARC record at all, which is mind blowing. So there's a couple ways to look at it. There's still a lot of people out there that are sending out emails that are not protected. And on the flip side of it is MSPs, you have a huge opportunity out there for your client base who's sending out unsecured email. And if you look at the clients that do have, or the domains that do have a DMARC record in place, it's grown, right? Now we're at 47.7% of those, which is up from 2023. But out of the ones that have that valid DMARC record, only 28% of those are on the P none status. Or excuse me, 28% on the P none and only 9.5% on the P reject. And basically what that means, if you're looking at these three record types, you're looking at none and quarantine and reject. So if you are on a none status, what that is telling the email recipient is, hey, if the SPF doesn't align and if the DKIM record doesn't align, I'm not going to do anything with it, right? So it's basically not having a DMARC record at all because there's no enforcement whatsoever. So what a lot of people also don't realize is that it's not just the client's domain that has to be aligned. It's every single sending source that sends email out through their domain. Those sending sources have to be aligned, right? And it's much easier to do it through a managed platform. But once you get all the sending sources aligned, then you can move it to quarantine, which basically means, hey, if the SPF or DKIM records don't align, then we're going to send it to quarantine. So at least they can find it in their spam box. But if it's a bad message, they can still access it. And that is why Google, Yahoo, Microsoft, all the major ESP providers are pushing towards the P reject status to protect their mail users, which basically means if the SPF and the DKIM records don't align, that message is going to be rejected. And that protects the end user from harm, but it also protects the brand reputation of the sender as well.
Oh, I skipped one.
Yeah. Was there one before this? Was there a slide before this? Oh, no. Okay.
Right into this one.
Or yeah, my mind's just playing tricks on me. But I mean, I think again, when you're looking at DMARC, I think we have to realize that as an MSP, when we're looking at our clients, there's not a client that's really too small to have DMARC enforcement on their account, right? It doesn't matter. You're prone to phishing. You're prone to. I think I don't know, Mandy, have you heard this stat? I heard some stat a couple of years ago that the average small business, when they were taken on like a phishing or a malware attempt, it was like $80,000 is
Yeah.
was the average cost of a small business when they get
Yeah.
taken. Have you heard that?
I've heard that. And I think, I don't know if that's the newest, but I think it even goes up from
Yeah,
there presently, that it's gotten to crazy amounts.
yeah. And then, I mean, that's just a question for the MSPs that are out there, right? Is to think about that. As a small or medium-sized business, as your client, are they able to handle that, right? What would happen if they got taken for a malware scam or a phishing scam and they were hit with it, would they be able to survive an $80,000 attack, right? But that's why we give you the ability to be notified for these things, right? You've got to be able to stay on top. You've got to be able to monitor these sending sources. You've got to be able to, and this is again just another layer of security that you have in there. It's very small because it's DNS based, but it's very powerful.
Yeah. I think that's the small layers too. They often end up being the most important ones, where if that's missed, that could have easily stopped something from getting further than it could have. And like you were saying with the $80,000 number, even just downtime costing you that much, not being
Yeah.
able to get back up and running, not being able to run sales cycles, whatever it is you're doing, can be detrimental to businesses that are on the smaller end and aren't going to recover like large enterprises are, that can afford crazy cybersecurity things, that even if things go wrong for them, they have the funds to back it up. So that's why, like we were talking about earlier, when you're talking about these smaller to medium sized businesses that MSPs tend to be the key holders, the protectors of, it's even more critical for them to have these in place and to be able to implement these little pieces of the layer that end up making massive impacts to not only their cybersecurity stack, but also just their business in general.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you've got these larger companies, the names like Wells Fargo and, the banks and things like that, right? And everybody we talked about at the beginning of the webinar, how people think those are the targets, right? Those targets, obviously, if a cyber criminal were to be able to hack that, their take on that would be large. However,
Right.
those with all the ITs that they have in staff, all the resources that they pour into cybersecurity, those are much more trickier for the cyber criminals to get into, right? But if they can get 10 of the smaller businesses that are out there, right? If they can take
Exactly.
10 smaller businesses, it's much easier for them and they can take just as much or more if they got into one major account.
Exactly. And it's like you said, it's potentially easier for them as they've realized that they typically don't have the amount of cybersecurity protocol as like a Wells Fargo would. So I think that's where, like you're saying, if they took 10 of them, not only was it easier for them, the return was the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'll talk on that line. I'll talk a little bit about kind of how the cybersecurity, the CyberFOX products that line up into these stacks, again, are filling smaller gaps here. Privilege access management specifically, a lot of people think, like we're talking with the large enterprise, that it's something that's going to be this massive undertaking. It's kind of gotten a bad rap for, well, now everyone's going to be locked out of everything, everyone's going to be shut down. Again, with this people first approach that I have in mind with securing that human layer, is you also need these people to be able to do their work efficiently. So that's where a privilege access management piece comes into place, where people are worried they're going to get shut down, people are going to get locked out, you're going to have a lot of admin tickets just waiting for people to get the application control that they need. But something that where it's a huge vulnerability, so people tend to just not implement it. They're like, I don't want to deal with that. The amount of tickets, the amount of work that's not going to be streamlined if I put a PAM in place is just not worth it to me. I'd rather take the risk. But these vulnerabilities represented 40% of all Microsoft vulnerabilities identified last year. That's a huge percentage to just be left to chance potentially, because it could slow down some of your work. And that's where having an efficient PAM tool like Auto Elevate that's not locking every single user down from every single thing. One example we use is like a Spotify. Can you go in there and block Spotify? Yes, because you have that ability to customize, but we're blocking things that are known bad actors. So that's where I think we're taking that little bit simpler approach to PAM and applying it for these small to medium sized businesses that don't have the time and the effort you would need to take to go full zero trust, to shut everything down, to block every single thing that's coming through your environment. And we're giving back those keys while still being very cyber secure. So we're giving them that piece of back. So that's assuming credentials will be compromised. Again, at that human layer, something's gotten through where your credentials are compromised. Now imagine it's not just a standard user in your environment. It's somebody who has admin credentials, or it's the privilege sprawl, as it's called, where you have all these admin accounts that are out there that are either stale, they're unused, or you've just given it to everyone, or you're not even aware that all of this privilege is out there. And now something's gotten through either from that lack of training or from that very innocent human mistake. And now not only do they have access to a little bit of your environment, they have that admin credential where they now have access to everything that again can lead to that detriment in a small business where instead of maybe being having a minor inconvenience with a local admin or a standard user, now you have this person, this hacker, this bad actor who has that admin level control in your environment. So having a PAM tool in place, especially an efficient one that's not going to slow down your workflow, but is also going to provide that security layer for you, is going to protect you from a lot further damage than what could have happened. So it's limiting how much damage that small human error could actually cause. And that's something where, Alan, I don't know if you've talked about PAM a lot, but how they kind of go hand in hand is securing that piece of a layer where we're talking about this layered security approach with that next piece of, like you said, if it's in that quarantine and the person lets it through, that mistake with an admin credential is really bad. We've taken a really bad turn that could have
Yeah.
been prevented.
I mean, I had a conversation with someone on this last week, and it's really interesting this comes up. I guess this would also, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, which people do quite a lot, but this might come in handy if you had two companies that were merging, like you had one like an acquisition company acquiring another company, and you wanted to make sure that all the admin credentials and the access was blocked. Is that something that would fit into play here with this?
Absolutely. If you're, and typically change is the biggest culprit of admin accounts being left out that aren't needed anymore or any longer. Somebody leaves the company, there's a merger, there's change in structure of who has what. And none of these people should have it at all. So having it out there is already the risk. And then, yeah, so if you merge with a company, you acquire a company that maybe they had that in place. They're like, we're just going to have all admin because we can't be worried about it, but you don't. You definitely need to implement that across your entire organization at that point. And that's another thing, something like CyberFOX Auto Elevate would do is before you even get to the point of blocking, you're running that test across your environment. So if you're even evaluating an acquisition or a merger, you could put that test on that environment and see how much admin is actually out there. And a lot of times we do see people who are surprised. They'll come in, they're like, "Oh no, we're good. We removed all the admin accounts." And then we run that audit and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know those were out there." So that's just another piece where just identifying those admin accounts being out there and being able to remove them are going to help you in the long run. Go. The next piece, again, with this layered approach, is DNS filtering. You had mentioned the DNS level before. Obviously, that's a great place to start. So, a crazy stat that I thought was threat actors created more than 1,000 new malicious domains every day just 2 years ago in 2024. And that's a lot of malicious domains to make in a year. That's nearly 400,000. So you assume over the past 2 years, we're at nearly a million malicious domains that were created, which is a lot of work on these people, which
Yep.
in turn tends to make people think you see stats like this, you're like, well, then that means we need to do a ton of work. It's going to be a heavy uplift again to layer in to protect from things like that, where just having a DNS filtering solution is already going to help you a long way, which ties in with what I just talked about with the PAM, where that's fronting even before you would get to that level. Maybe you could have blocked that malicious domain from even being clicked and then gaining admin credentials and going even further with something like a DNS filtering. So it goes beyond just that layer of security awareness training, because if you're trained not to click the link, if the DNS is preventing it, the DNS filtering is preventing that, then you've removed that layer as well. So the way I'm kind of talking about these pieces, Alan, if the way I think we're looking at this is you're taking these pieces of the layer that each one is cutting back what the impact that human mistake could have on your environment.
Yep. Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the other things that we always talk with MSPs about when they're talking with their clients, as an MSP, do you know how many domains your client actually has? Right?
Yeah,
Everybody is aware of the ones that they're sending out through from an email standpoint, but how many domains have they purchased? And how
right,
many domains are out there that are unprotected? Right? Because from our standpoint, as far as DMARC enforcement, even if they have 10 domains out there that are not being used, those are open targets to be hijacked, right?
right,
Those domains need, and they're separate settings, right? You're not going to use the same domain, the same DMARC settings for those domains that you're use for your regular sending domains, but all of those domains need to be protected, all of
right.
them.
And I think that's where people don't realize with these DNS, the protecting of the domains via DNS security, we're not trying to fix or change human behavior, because humans are set in their ways. Our people are set in their ways, especially when you're working quickly. Again, what tends to matter most, especially for MSPs, for their clients, is people getting work done. So we're not trying to fix or change a human behavior. We're trying to protect common behavior and make that safer by adding in these layers. So the next one I want to talk about is going to be passwords. This is one of probably the oldest ones in the book. Writing down your passwords, remembering passwords, all the things people say not to do. It's the easiest one to talk about sometimes, because sometimes I feel like it is the most obvious. Is just, oh, have a secure password, but it's not as easy as you might think. In 2024 alone, again, more than 2.8 billion with a B billion passwords were posted for sale in some sort of criminal forum. That is a lot of passwords. I thought that many domains was a lot, but this is 2.8 billion passwords. So, one thing, password manager, it's such an easy thing to implement that, again, people either you've just forgotten about it, it's on the back burner because it's almost become such a common thing to talk about at this point, but it eliminates so many base level issues. Humans aren't built to remember that many passwords, especially with the requirements that you're supposed to have on passwords these days. One of our running jokes is, oh, if you know my pet and my birthday, you have access to everything that I have, which is funny at its core, but it's also not, because I'm like, that's what you're not supposed to do. You shouldn't even have to remember a pet and a birthday, because
Yeah,
with
let's
a
let's
password
not even
manager,
talk about all the silly quizzes on social media, right?
yes, that somebody thought was fun. But I was like, somebody put that out there for you to fill in every single possible password creation that, and they're doing that because, like I said, people aren't built to remember strings of intense passwords or more than one specifically. So that joke running around doesn't even have to be a thing with a password manager. At that point, you don't even have to remember a pet or your mom's birthday or your dad's grandmother's name. So it's things like that that are being removed just by simply using a password manager. And especially in organizations when we're now having to, before it was never share a password, never share a password. But now at work, we need to be able to sometimes share passwords for certain accounts for the Wi-Fi. I always use the Wi-Fi as an example, the office Wi-Fi. Something as simple as that. You don't want that written down and posted around your office. You can share that through a secure password manager, like the one CyberFOX offers, obviously, but just having that piece in place and that secure share. So now it's gone from just you personally as the one person, the one end user. You need that organizationally to have that secure share, those password vaults where those passwords are protected. It lets you know if they're outdated, if they're being reused, just things past beyond just you and your passwords that you need for yourself, having that layer for the organizational impact, for having something that's letting you know, hey, this password, you've used it 6 times. Let us generate a secure password for you. So things like that that seem very simple, but if you're trying to do that all yourself, it's going to be very, very difficult, and you're not going to be secure if you're sharing an Excel sheet. The fact that people still do that baffles me. And so yeah, it's something that for an MSP, it's cost effective. It's harder to implement because you have to get that buy-in from the end user. But I think explaining that it also makes their life easier. When you're thinking that people first, that securing the human layer, I'm not trying to remember passwords and somebody's pet's name and having somebody always ask you. I know there's people on here who are like, hey, Alan, what's that password? Can you send me the password to this again? I need to log into this account again. Can you send that to me? Which
Here,
was one of our
let me give you
examples.
my tip on creating passwords. No, no, I'm just joking.
No, exactly though. And then that's what's going on in organizations that don't have that password management, that password manager in place, where it's like, oh yeah, let me just send that over to you with remote work now. Let me pass you this sticky note across the desk when you are in office. So yeah, when you're telling end users like, hey, this is actually going to be easier for you because you don't have to do that. People won't be asking you. And if they are, you securely share it and then it's there and you can set parameters around that inside of a secure password manager. So it definitely makes a huge difference. And again, it's not slowing anyone down. If anything, it's helping your people be more efficient and be more secure and not fighting human habits. We all need passwords. We all have so many things we're logging into and again, working quickly. So yeah, you're not fighting the human habits. You're helping them and making them more secure at the same time. So having that password manager, again, a frontline approach. All of these are a proactive approach, which goes into something, Alan, I think we had showed you just briefly, but here at CyberFOX, we talk about a lot this multi-layered defense approach to cybersecurity, which is kind of what this whole thing has been about, but specifically surrounding humans and the innocent human errors that can take place that can lead to detrimental breaches. And even if they're not innocent, you want to protect from people who could be a risk to your organization. So the way I look at this proactive approach in the simplest terms that I think just resonates a lot, at least with myself and some of the people I've talked to, are if you think of this circle of defense, this multi layer defense, as your house. So if you are securing your house with the biggest, baddest security system that money can buy, you have the cameras, you have the motion sensors, you have the immediate alert that calls the police when something goes off. You have all of that in place, but then you left your front door unlocked. So are all of those still going to go off if someone comes through the front door? Probably, but it's going to be once that person is already inside your house. Some damage to an extent has already been done. So when you're taking these smaller motioned proactive approaches, what you're doing is you're locking your front door. So now that person that's trying to get through, that bad actor, has to go around, go through a window. They have to do a lot more work to get into your environment, to get through than just simply opening your front door and walking in and then relying on what would be the EDR, the MDR, your SOC, the bigger, badder approaches to come through. So not only are they working harder, your cybersecurity is working harder, the hacker has to work harder if you've just locked the front door. So that's where we're looking at a DMARC, a DNS filtering, a spam filter, the privilege and password management is that proactive frontline approach that's locking your front door where a lot of the damage that we've talked about from a small error that could have been done is eliminated just at the door. So that's kind of how I like to look at this. I think that's where EasyDMARC and CyberFOX fit together and where that if that human layer is outside of this circle, all of these pieces from most preventative and simplest to response and most complicated are in the center fall into place in that layered security approach.
No, I agree 100%. You know, their MSPs have enough on their plate right now, right? It used to
Exactly.
be, I mean, when I first got into the cybersecurity business, we were working with it was pretty simple at that point. They were doing break fix. The MSPs, they were at that point they were selling hosted exchange, right? They were moving people from on cloud solutions um, to hosted exchange solutions. But now MSPs are now having to move into security. Having to become security experts, and now they're also having to become email deliverability experts. So as we move through this expansion of the responsibilities that MSPs are moving in, whatever we can move to be automated for them, right? Whatever we can do to make it easier for them to grow their business and to do the things that they need to do. And that's where things like these layered security approaches and where DMARC comes into play, right? Being able to set that and get notifications and being able to set it in a simple platform without having to be able to log into each of the DNS accounts for your clients. But I think one of the things that we could talk about really also is, when you're once a year, I think, MSP should review their risk assessment on their clients, right? They should go through and look at the vulnerabilities and what have changed. And that's where, for example, DMARC comes into play. When you come in, if you're looking at a new client, or if you are, looking at to add DMARC, or your client is having email issues, right? Having the ability to do something like this risk assessment where you can actually point out to your clients where their vulnerability lies and what all this means. Because honestly, I mean, Mandy, you know as well as I do, right? And some of the stuff that you're aware of, your end clients, they don't have a hill of beans of what DMARC is, right?
Yeah.
They don't know what some of this stuff is. And, a lot of times they just feel like you're trying to sell them a bag of beans, magic beans, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's true. So we have to be able to educate these clients, and that's where we have these reports that come into play that give them an education on email deliverability and what it means and what they can expect at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that you brought up the risk assessments too, because we run into that even with cyber insurance now. A lot of them require a PAM. Password managers have been on there what feels like forever. So yeah, being able, not just being able to secure your environment, but being able to assess your risk and then also meet some of those cyber insurance requirements that are external to your organization prove really important and are oftentimes filled or improved when it comes to like a policy for cyber insurance from putting these layers in place.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, email deliverability is just that base level, right? Email is not going away anytime soon. And you've got to make sure, because if you don't have this in play, what's going to wind up is your clients. I believe that I was at a conference last week. Mandy, listen to me on this. I kid you not. I was at a conference last week. MSP came up to our booth, said that his billing department was having billing problems and their invoices were not getting delivered to their clients. Now, this is an MSP because, and we talked through the situation, what had happened was he had set his DMARC to reject because he thought that what he's supposed to do. But guess what he didn't do? He didn't make sure that all his sources were aligned.
Oh
So
God.
now all his invoices are going out and it was telling the recipients, reject this because the source is not aligned.
Oh God.
So,
It's crazy what people put in place.
yeah, right, right. So that's why you need help. You need people that can walk you through it. You need alerts, you need notifications, right? And it's a gradual move, right? The DMARC is a spectrum, it's an ongoing journey. And I know these MSPs, none of your individual clients would just go out and find a shiny new toy and decide they're going to use a new marketing tool and not tell you about it, right?
Right.
That's another vulnerability right there.
Exactly. So that's, I'll go ahead and go to the next slide. Um, just with all of the stack that we talked about and the vulnerabilities that are in place, it is one of those where not only do these protect from these human errors, it also is for you as an MSP, you're getting those alerts. You're much more aware of what's going on when you have something that's telling you what's going on in your environment. All of these tools help to do that. So it's obviously preventative. It's helping you out from an end user perspective and from a business perspective. But yeah, how much better are you as an MSP managing all of these things? Like you said, the last thing they need to do is spend more time managing something else. So when you have these tools that are putting that front layer up and also notifying you so you're not sitting there having to watch something, having to fully manage, having needing a team of people to manage this new software you've put in place. It's supposed to make not only your life easier and more secure, but also the end user.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, and the good thing is that both of us, right? We can walk the MSPs. Everybody that's on this call, right? They can walk. We have a trial with EasyDMARC. I'm sure you guys have some type of trial as well, right? How like if MSPs are wanting to get started with CyberFOX, right? They're maybe unhappy with their current solution, or maybe they don't have a solution. What's the best way for them to get started with you guys? What's their first step with CyberFOX?
Yeah, absolutely. A trial, absolutely. And we, like I said, when I'm speaking about the audit mode in Auto Elevate, is you get to experience it before you've made that before you've committed and made that purchase. And we have incredible engineers that will walk you through and literally set up your environments for all of our products step by step. Incredible account management, incredible support. I can't speak enough to how great they are. But yeah, at the end of the day, we want we're people first. We want to protect your people and we want to make you as an MSP your life easier. We don't want to add to your stack and then all of a sudden you're like, "Oh god, I have to manage these people and this product and deal with all of the things that would come along with." Like I said, Pam gets a bad rap because people think, "Oh gosh, now I have to deal with all these tickets. I have to fully manage it. I need to hire 3 people to manage it." No, it's not like that. You put it in place. One of my favorite quotes from an MSP I talked to, and I was like, "Oh yeah, how's it going with Auto Elevate?" And he said, "Great, I don't look at it." And I was like, "That's honestly that's the best use case I've heard because he said it. He put his rules in place. He worked with an engineer to get it set up, and within that first 2 weeks, he was just letting it run. It was doing what it needed to do. When he needed to get notified, he was. But it was so funny. He was like, "I don't look at it." I was like, that's like the best story we want to hear because it's just working. It just works and you feel good about it. You trust it. You've worked with good people here that have set you up. So
Yeah, that's awesome. And as we're starting to wind up, because I know we're at 45 minutes, we've got some questions. Did you see the questions?
oh no, I have not clicked on the questions.
Yeah, this is awesome. So Frank tells us, thank you for joining, Frank. He says that they're very happy with Auto Elevate, blocks the shadow IT employees from downloading programs. And then he says, is there or will there be the ability to prevent apps from being downloaded to browsers?
That I think we've just discussed that on Auto Elevate, but at this time, I think it's just when you're downloading applications because we're relying on that UAC interception to run Auto Elevate. But yeah, we'll definitely take that back to be discussed further. And
Yeah.
Frank, I can even send you any documentation that we have on any further information on downloading to browsers as well.
Yeah. So, and then on top of that, Kevin had another question. He wanted to know why an inactive registered only domain that's unused would require a DMARC record. And the reason is
Great
that
question.
it's a very good question, right? And the reason is because that domain, even though it's inactive and registered only, is still able to be hacked. It is still able for the bad guys to get in there and to spoof that domain and to send email out through that domain to your clients. The good news is like for us, Kevin, if you're registering an inactive domain, it's not going to cost you any more money, right? We don't charge you for those inactive domains. So it's better just to go ahead and set them up with your clients, protect those domains, even though they're registered only, to protect them from being hijacked and being used as a spoofing address to your clients. So, um, Are there any other questions? I mean, we've got a couple more minutes here. If there anybody else has any other questions, Mandy and I will be more than happy to answer them for you. And if not, I mean, it's I think this has been I think this has been a great webinar.
I think so too, Alan. It was really great discussing, just kind of talking through all I don't know how many times I said layers, but I'd love to get a count on that. But yeah, and then we have the QR codes up now as well. Stay on, ask questions. We'll be here, like Alan said. Scan the QR code if you want to start a free trial with EasyDMARC. If you want to learn more about any of the CyberFOX solutions, you can reach out to either of us, anybody on our teams. We are always, like I said, people first, happy to help. Love just having good conversations as well. Aaron just saw that you said auto elevate works well for us. Love to hear that. That's, like I said, with my example of one of the best conversations I had, him saying he doesn't use it was the funniest but also best use case, because that's how we want it to beat the PAM allegations of being difficult. So
Oh, we have a hand raised by Rob Palmer. I think Rob, did you have a question? Can You're more than happy to put that in the chat if you had a question.
I saw William Whitney too. Love auto elevate. Needed it 20 years ago. Love that. And it's funny because Microsoft came out and said not to have admin privilege in 1995. And people, it seems like just in the last few years, are finally taking on to that. And I'm like, this has been around. They said it 30 years ago.
No,
So
absolutely.
it's an exciting time to be around.
All right. Well, very good. Mandy, thank you again for your time and joining us. We will have to do another one of these. We'll have to do another one and see what we can come up with.
Yeah, this was great. Thanks so much again, Alan, and to everyone that attended. Obviously, send any other questions. Check out CyberFOX EasyDMARC and have a great rest of
Yeah.
your week.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on LinkedIn. If you guys don't need any questions, feel free to look me up on LinkedIn. I'll be more than happy to help you out.
Same.